So, I never really liked taxidermy. I think my negative association with taxidermy comes partly from a bizarre educational series I watched at school about a peregrine falcon, and the baddies had hideous, grotesque, wild animals plastered across their walls. So that, and a holiday to Austria. We stayed in this wood cabin in the middle of a beautiful forest, and the lady who lived on the first floor had decorated her dining room with just tragic animal trophies, and for some reason I distinctively remember her flat smelling of goose fat. However, I now have a newfound appreciation for taxidermy after a recent visit to the Horniman Museum in London. I was invited to the launch of a photography exhibition called Afterlife by Shaun Dooley, and now I'm looking at dioramas and stuffed specimens in a completely new light. In Victorian times, because of an increased interest in natural history, it was fashionable to amass a whole collection of taxidermied animals. Whimsical and even anthropomorphic taxidermies were all the rage. But sadly, because of its popularity, the news of a species becoming scarce would lead to a frenzy of amateur hunters and taxidermies for collectors and museums, often contributing to the decline or even extinction of an animal. But the collections inside natural history museums are an important catalogue of nature's diversity. For scientists, they need them to accurately describe and understand species, and they're brilliant for the public so that we can get an insight into the variety of life on our planet. Emily Graslie and Michael Aranda over at The Brain Scoop have just made a fantastic video about Carl Akeley at the Chicago Field Museum. And Carl Akeley, he turned taxidermy from glorified upholstery, which I hate, to anatomically accurate figures and scenes. Quite the change from the caricatures I used to see splashed across goose fat ladies' dining room. The work of many natural history museum taxidermists are often confined to the vaults of a museum where they can be protected from pests and moths, but here they're only seen by researchers and scientists. Shaun Dooley wanted to document these rare treasures and bring them to a wider audience. The Horniman Museum thought it was a fantastic idea, so off he went in search of his subjects in the deepest, darkest vaults of museums across the country. The exhibition was simple, beautiful specimens on white backgrounds. But something that immediately struck me was that I was spending way more time with these creatures in their 2D form than I would have done the actual taxidermies presented to me in a cabinet. I had a negative preconception of taxidermy and, to be honest, had never given it a chance. But photography, not at all. The photography form provided me some distance from the subject, which therefore made me look harder. I was most taken aback by how much life and character Shaun had managed to inject into lifeless specimens. Turns out taxidermists in the early 20th century positioned animals in poses that were more human to make them more appealing to us, and Shaun drew my attention to a particularly sad-looking chimpanzee skeleton. Truth is, the animal wouldn't actually stand like that, but it did make me more emphatic. In much the same way, Shaun has used light and angles to tastefully bring out the character of the animal. So instead of shying away from a dead stuffed specimen, I actually looked closer and smiled. And my favourite, without a doubt, and probably the star of the exhibition, is the kakapo. The kakapo represents hope for endangered species. At one point in the 1970s, it was thought that the tiny remaining population of kakapo were entirely male, so it was assumed that they were doomed for extinction. But when all hope was lost, a new population was found on a tiny protected island in Malaysia, and thanks to an ongoing conservation project in New Zealand, the kakapo population is about 125 and rising. I spoke with Shaun about the kakapo and actually filmed an interview with him, but we were rudely interrupted by a choir of angels. So excuse me for talking for him, but to sum things up, like the kakapo, all of the species presented in Afterlife are either extinct or threatened in some way. Every preserved specimen represents a life lost. The wonderful thing about these photographs is not only can they be shared beyond the safe walls of a curator's office, but also they provide a way for an audience like myself who previously misunderstood taxidermy to appreciate it as both an art form, but also a way of admiring the natural world. I think this exhibition reminds us that we have a duty to protect the animals and life that we have on this planet, but also to remember the ones that we've forgotten. So what are your thoughts on taxidermy? If you can, do go and see Shaun Dooley's Afterlife at the Horniman Museum in London. And if you've been already, give this video a thumbs up. If you've seen the walrus, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you soon. Bye!